Welcome to the final part of our journey into the Norse myths too dark for Disney. I'm Sarah, and over the past 3 episodes we've explored the authentic darkness that lies at the heart of Norse mythology, culminating in the horrific story of Loki's punishment that no mainstream studio would ever dare to adapt. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what a faithful adaptation would look like, and reveal why understanding these dark stories might be more important for our modern world than you ever imagined. But first, let me share something personal that happened during the creation of this series. As I was researching and writing these scripts, I started having nightmares. Not about the mythological content itself, but about what it represented. I was dreaming about a world where we've become so insulated from difficult truths that we've lost the ability to process genuine hardship when it inevitably arrives. This got me thinking about something that I hadn't considered before. What if the sanitization of our cultural narratives isn't just about making entertainment more palatable? What if it's actually weakening us as a society by removing the psychological tools that previous generations used to build resilience and cope with adversity? The more I studied authentic Norse mythology, the more I realized that these stories weren't just entertainment for the Vikings. They were training manuals for psychological survival. They were ways of preparing people for a world that could be brutal, unfair, and unforgiving. They taught essential lessons about endurance, loyalty, and the importance of maintaining your values even when everything around you is falling apart. Today, I'm going to show you what it would look like to experience one of these stories in its full, authentic power. I've created a complete dramatic reenactment script for Loki's punishment that captures the emotional impact these stories were designed to have. This isn't sanitized. This isn't Disney-fied. This is mythology as psychological medicine. But before we dive into that, let me explain why I believe this matters so much for our current cultural moment. We're living through a time of unprecedented change and uncertainty, political upheaval, climate change, economic instability, social fragmentation. Many people, particularly young people, seem unprepared for the reality that life can be difficult, that problems don't always have solutions, and that sometimes the best we can do is endure with dignity. I think part of this unpreparedness comes from growing up on sanitized narratives that promise happy endings and clear moral victories. We've been trained to expect resolution, redemption, and positive outcomes. But real life doesn't always provide those things. When reality fails to match our narrative expectations, we experience it as a fundamental failure rather than as a normal aspect of existence. The Norse myths, in their authentic form, provide a different kind of training. They prepare us for a world where good people suffer, where justice isn't always served, where love isn't always enough, and where sometimes the only victory available is maintaining your integrity in the face of defeat. These aren't pleasant lessons, but they're necessary ones. Now let me present to you the dramatic reenactment script I've developed for Loki's punishment. This is designed to be performed as a serious artistic piece that honors the original story's psychological impact, while presenting it in a way that modern audiences can engage with. This is what authentic Norse mythology adaptation would actually look like, if we had the courage to present it faithfully. The scene opens in darkness, with only the sound of dripping water echoing through a cavern. Slowly, dim torchlight reveals rough stone walls and the gathered figures of the gods, their faces grim with purpose. Thor stands with his hammer, Odin bears his spear, and Frigg weeps for her slain son Balder. They have brought Loki and his family to this place of judgment. Loki enters in chains, defiant, but beginning to show fear as he sees his 2 young sons, Vali and Nari, trembling beside their mother Sigin. The gods speak no words of ceremony or explanation. Justice has been decided, and they proceed with methodical precision. The transformation of Vali happens slowly, horrifically. His body contorts, his screams echo off the cave walls, and Loki's pleas for mercy are ignored. When the wolf that was once his son turns on his brother, the audience must witness not just the violence but the complete destruction of family bonds. Sigin's wails mix with Loki's cries, creating a symphony of grief that fills the cavern. The binding with Nari's entrails is conducted in ritual silence, each length of intestine carefully positioned to maximize both physical restraint and psychological torment. The gods work with the precision of surgeons, ensuring that every aspect of the punishment serves multiple purposes. When Skadi positions the serpent above Loki's face, the first drop of venom elicits a scream that shakes the earth itself. But it's Sigin's choice to remain, to catch what poison she can in her bowl, that provides the story's most powerful emotional moment. Her loyalty becomes both Loki's salvation and his additional torment, as her presence ensures he will never be alone with his suffering, but will always be reminded of what his actions have cost his family. The final image is of eternal stasis. Loki bound by his son's remains, Sigin holding her bowl with mechanical devotion, the serpent dripping its endless poison, and the gods departing to their halls while earthquakes mark each moment when love cannot quite overcome justice. This is mythology as it was meant to be experienced, as a full-body emotional encounter that leaves the audience fundamentally changed. It's not entertainment in the modern sense, it's ritual, it's psychological transformation. It's the kind of story that burns itself into memory and provides reference points for understanding when life presents its own impossible choices and unbearable consequences. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. This is incredibly dark. It's disturbing. It's not the kind of content that should be widely available or casually consumed. And you're absolutely right. This isn't casual entertainment, and it shouldn't be treated as such. But here's what I've realized through my research. The fact that we find this story so disturbing says something important about how protected we've become from the darker aspects of human experience. Previous generations lived with much more direct awareness of violence, death, and suffering. They needed stories that helped them process these realities and find meaning within them. We've created a culture where we can avoid most direct encounters with hardship, but we haven't eliminated hardship itself. We've just made ourselves less prepared to handle it when it inevitably arrives. The sanitized narratives we prefer may be more pleasant, but they don't provide the psychological tools we need for navigating genuine adversity. This doesn't mean we should traumatize children or glorify violence, but it does mean we might benefit from age-appropriate exposure to stories that acknowledge life's harder truths and help us develop emotional resilience. The Norse myths, properly contextualized and presented, could serve that function. I've been experimenting with this in my own life. Instead of consuming only entertainment that makes me feel good in the moment, I've been deliberately engaging with stories, films, and books that challenge me emotionally and force me to confront difficult questions about existence, morality, and human nature. The results have been surprising. I feel more prepared for setbacks, more capable of handling disappointment, and more appreciative of good things when they do happen. I've developed what I can only describe as emotional muscles that I didn't know I was missing. This brings me to my final point, and the reason I believe this series matters beyond just academic curiosity about mythology. We're facing challenges as a society that require the kind of psychological resilience that authentic Norse mythology was designed to build. Climate change isn't going to be solved by optimism and positive thinking. Political polarization isn't going to disappear because we wish it would. Economic inequality isn't going away because we tell ourselves better stories. These are long-term, complex problems that will require sustained effort, acceptance of difficult realities, and the ability to maintain hope and purpose, even when progress is slow or invisible. The Norse myths teach us how to find meaning in struggle, how to maintain loyalty in the face of betrayal, how to endure suffering without becoming bitter, and how to accept responsibility for consequences that can never be undone. These are skills we need as individuals and as a culture, but we can't develop these skills if we only engage with sanitized narratives that promise easy solutions and happy endings. We need stories that prepare us for the possibility that some problems don't have solutions, that some suffering can't be avoided, and that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is simply refuse to give up even when victory is impossible. This is why the myths that are too dark for Disney might be exactly the myths we need most. Not as casual entertainment, but as deliberate practice in emotional resilience. Not for children, but for adults who need to develop the psychological tools for navigating an uncertain world. I want to end this series with a challenge. Over the next month, I want you to deliberately seek out one piece of authentic cultural content that deals with difficult themes, whether it's classical literature, traditional folk tales, historical accounts, or artistic works that don't promise happy endings. Engage with it seriously. Think about what it's trying to teach, and notice how it affects your ability to handle real-world challenges. I think you'll discover what I've discovered through this research project. The stories that are too dark for Disney might be exactly the stories that can help us become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of finding meaning in a world that doesn't always make sense. We've sanitized our narratives, but we can't sanitize reality. The choice we face is whether we want to encounter life's hardships with the psychological tools that previous generations developed, or whether we want to face them unprepared because we've been trained to expect something easier. The Norse myths that are too dark for Disney aren't just historical curiosities. They're survival manuals for psychological endurance. They're training programs for emotional resilience. They're reminders that humans have always faced impossible choices and unbearable consequences, and that the measure of a person isn't whether they avoid suffering, but how they respond to it when it comes. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the darkness that mainstream media won't touch. I hope it's given you new perspectives on the stories we tell ourselves and the psychological preparation we might need for the challenges ahead. Sometimes the most important truths are the ones that are too dark for Disney, and sometimes the most valuable stories are the ones that disturb us enough to change how we see the world. The authentic myths are waiting for anyone brave enough to encounter them. The question is whether we're ready to learn what they have to teach.